One of the most prominent voices on the far right made alarming comments over the weekend about the attack on the Capitol.
And by the way, not just one of the most outspoken voices on the far right, but also one of Kevin McCarthy's closest allies. She's emerged as one of Kevin McCarthy's closest allies in him getting the speakership.
Georgia Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene gave a speech at the New York Young Republican Club on Saturday night. She brought up a number of topics, some of them very disgusting and pornographic, and then the topic of January 6th and past accusations that she gave Capitol tours to Donald Trump's supporters in the days leading up to the insurrection. Greene then reportedly said, quote, "Then January 6th happened, and next thing you know, I organized the whole thing along with Steve Bannon." Greene went on to say, "I will tell you something. If Steve Bannon and I organized that, we would have won. Not to mention it would have been armed." As Joe said, her comments matter because of her influence with the ultra-conservative Freedom Caucus and the group's ability to block Kevin McCarthy's bid to become Speaker of the House.
Well, and as Jonathan O'Meara, as you were talking about earlier at the end of your show, Axios is reporting that she has been working very closely with Kevin McCarthy. And she is now one of Kevin McCarthy's most important allies in becoming Speaker. And this is a woman who had said, you know, if she had been in charge of the January 6th riots, they would have won and they would have been armed. That's Kevin McCarthy's Republican Party.
One of McCarthy's top lieutenants. McCarthy has made a play to the far right of the Republican House caucus since January 6th, since he condemned briefly Donald Trump, and he has realized he needs to curry favor with the right, in part in order to make sure that Donald Trump is still on his side to support his speakership bid. So he has spent now nearly 2 years trying to downplay some of the terrible things the extremists have said, to not punish them when obvious other leaders would have doled out stripped committee assignments or punished Republican members for saying or doing some of the things they did. Instead, he has placated them, he has wooed them, he has courted them because he knows he needs their support. And Marjorie Taylor Greene damn well knows that. And she knows that she's got a lot of power coming in right now. She's trying to garner support for McCarthy to get him across the finish line to become Speaker. And he is going to owe her greatly. If he becomes Speaker, he will be in her debt and her power will only increase. And that, what we just heard, those terrible remarks, that will be given a place of prominence within the Republican Party as it takes control of the House in a matter of weeks.
We've got a great group to talk about all of this. MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle joins us, former Chief of Staff to the DCCC, Adrian Elrod, and former aide to House Speaker Paul Ryan and House Speaker John Boehner, Brendan Buck. He is now an MSNBC political analyst. Good to have you all on board this morning.
So, Brendan, you know a bit about House leadership races and the deals that people make and sometimes the deals that people walk away from. Kevin McCarthy is now staking his speakership on a woman who this past weekend said that if she were in charge of the January 6th riots, that her side would have won and they would have been armed. How does that define Kevin McCarthy moving forward if he continues to cozy up to somebody who's talking about an armed insurrection?
Yeah, you got to go back and look at the fact that Kevin McCarthy was inches away from being Speaker in 2015, had it taken away from him by the Freedom Caucus, and he has vowed that he's not going to let that happen again. And obviously, it's the far right that is threatening him. And so he needs somebody to go in there and basically, you're talking about envoys. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is his envoy to these people on the far right. And his strategy, basically from the beginning, was give them anything they want. My jaw dropped. I remember thinking about when he named Jim Jordan to be on the Intelligence Committee, if you remember, during impeachment. Jim Jordan is now the chairman, or going to be the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to get her committees back. He doesn't really have any other path forward other than giving them what they want. Now, they're going to make a bunch of demands, but basically his argument is, I've given you everything. There's nothing else that you can ask from me, and hope that the rest of the conference loses patience with them.
Now, you know, Mike Barnicle, it wasn't so long ago that Steve King had all of his committee assignments taken away from him by Republicans for saying things that actually look very mild compared to what Marjorie Taylor Greene said this weekend. And again, here's somebody talking about an insurrection and talking about how it should have been armed.
You know, Joe, there seems to be a consensus that Kevin McCarthy is of limited ability. And he has made so many deals thus far. Just listening to Brendan reminded me of this. He's made so many deals thus far over the past 3 or 4 years in his pursuit of becoming Speaker that he can no longer remember what deals he made. If you want to know the future of the Republican Party, as you were discussing quite articulately last hour, take a look at the cover of the New York Post this morning. Eyes on the spies. And it's the Republicans' intention, Kevin McCarthy's intention, to subpoena 51 former members of the American intelligence community to pursue the Hunter Biden story. So if you're out there sitting at home, worried about your home heating oil bill, your grocery bill, the status of your kids in school, forget about that, because we've got to get to the bottom of the Hunter Biden story. We've got to cut Clapper and Brennan in and find out why they lied.
Yeah, no,
we've seen this before, where they go after Joe Biden's remaining son. You know, that people like Joe Biden, we've gone through this. Haven't we gone through this?
The thing is, let the chips fall where they may. If Hunter Biden has done anything wrong, the DOJ's investigating him. Let the chips fall where they may.
Not saying
but
that.
This singular obsession, though, as I've said before, they're in a bubble. And it causes them to lose. Now, as everybody knows, the New York Post, it's the official paper of Morning Joe. So I don't ever speak ill of the New York Post. I will say they got way ahead of themselves on Durham's hilariously bad investigation. Just like the Wall Street Journal had some op-ed writers way ahead. Every time they go down this path and they want to investigate the investigators. They want to attack the FBI. They want to attack the CIA. They want to attack the intel community. It never pays off for them. And Jen, if you look at this, the obsession among these House Republicans on Hunter Biden's laptop, the obsession on Twitter, Adrian, the obsession on January 6th, because they think we're treating the rioters, the insurrectionists, the terrorists too tough. And then you've got one of the most important players in getting Kevin McCarthy the speakership saying her regret is that they didn't bring guns to the insurrection. I mean, again, this is just proving my point. Republicans are in a bubble. They're going to keep losing elections. Because they're not talking about inflation. They're not talking about health care costs going up. They're not talking about how hard it is for first-time home buyers to get a house. They're not talking about the kitchen table items that matter the most to Americans who decide elections.
Yeah, Joe, you're exactly right. I mean, newsflash to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Kevin McCarthy, the tactics that you've been using, the rhetoric that you've been espousing over the past 2 years, over the past 6 years, has not been working. Joe, you've talked about this time and time again on this show. Republicans have lost consecutively since 2016. Every cycle has gotten worse and worse and worse from them. 2022 was not a good midterm cycle for them at all, historically a bad midterm cycle, and it doesn't seem like they're getting the memo. I mean, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene using this crazy, divisive, dangerous rhetoric. Mika, as you mentioned, making some really lewd comments, the pornographic comments. I mean, this is not what the American people told elected officials, politicians in Washington that they wanted in the 2022 midterms. They told elected officials, we want government to work. We want an effective and efficient government that's fighting for us, that is working on the policies that matter to our American families. This is not what they stood for. And look, you know, I heard you guys talk earlier about President Biden's numbers going up, his approval numbers going up significantly over the past few weeks. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Americans are looking at what the Republicans are saying, and they're saying our top priority is to investigate Hunter Biden's laptop. I think the more and more they try to get these frivolous matters out there and say this is what we want to talk about, meritless matters for that matter, it's only going to make Biden's approval numbers going up because he is delivering for the American people, and that is what that's what people signed up for in the 2022 midterms.